As of today, COVID-19 self-quarantine is no longer mandatory in South Korea. The mask mandate has also been lifted in most medical facilities, clearing the last few remaining restrictions as the country has entered the endemic phase. South Korea posted another fall in exports in May, marking the 15th straight month of trade deficit on slumping chip demand. Following its failed attempt at putting a spy satellite into space, North Korea declares it will continue its attempts, sparking warnings from the South and the U.S. Good afternoon. For the first time in 3 years, South Korea fully returns to pre-pandemic normalcy. As of today, there's no more mandatory self-quarantine for those who have COVID-19. And the mask mandate is also lifted in most medical facilities. This as the country has into the endemic phase. Our Choi Soo-hyung has our top story.
From Thursday, June 1st, South Korea's national crisis level for COVID-19 will be downgraded from serious to alert. After a battle lasting 3 years and 4 months, the lasting remaining antivirus measures are no longer required. First, there will be no mandatory self-isolation for confirmed cases of COVID-19. People who catch COVID-19 are still recommended to self-isolate for 5 days, but it is no longer mandatory. The indoor mask mandates at clinics, doctors' offices and pharmacies will be lifted, except for high-risk facilities such as senior care centers and hospitals.
I feel much more comfortable. We didn't have to wear a mask except in clinics or pharmacies, but there was still the hassle of carrying a mask. It is much better because it's all lifted finally.
Incoming travelers will no longer be recommended to take a PCR test, and the testing centers for these travelers will be closed. The number of confirmed cases will now be reported weekly rather than daily. There are some concerns about easing regulations as COVID-19 has not been completely gone. However, the health authorities have determined that the situation in South Korea continues to improve, is being managed stably, and that the medical and response capacities are sufficient. Therefore, they announced the intention to transition from an emergency system to a daily management system.
The health authorities will follow a roadmap to adjust the crisis stage until COVID-19 becomes endemic, like influenza, and can be continuously managed, fulfilling their duty to protect people's health.
However, they stated that if a highly serious mutation occurs, they could consider raising the crisis alert level again. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
South Korea posted another decline in exports in May on slumping chip demand. This marks the 15th straight month that the trade balance remains in the red. Our finance correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
South Korea's exports continued to fall last month. Data from the Trade Ministry on Thursday shows that the value of exports fell 15.2% from the previous year to $52.2 billion in May. That's the 8th consecutive month that monthly exports have seen an on-year drop. The downward trend in exports is largely due to the slump in semiconductors, the nation's key export item. Chip exports last month fell more than 36% compared to the previous year. They have seen an on-year decline since last August. According to the Trade Ministry, May's poor export figures were partly down to the base effect after the country posted its second highest ever export figures in May the previous year. Exports to 6 major areas such as China, the US, the ASEAN region, and the EU all dropped compared to the year before. The country's exports to China last month, however, recovered to the $10 billion mark, and the daily value of exports was the highest since last October. Meanwhile, imports were down 14% from the previous year to $54.3 billion last month. With exports continuing to fall short of imports, the nation logged a trade deficit of $2.1 billion. This is the 15th consecutive month that the trade balance has remained in the red and the longest deficit since the 1997 Asian financial crisis. However, after peaking at more than $12 billion in January, the trade deficit is beginning to shrink. Last month was the second straight month since June last year that the deficit has been below the $2 billion mark. The Trade Ministry said it will focus on supporting and marketing promising export items as well as diversifying the export market. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Over in the U.S., the House of Representatives has approved a deal allowing the U.S. government to borrow more money, seemingly saving the world's biggest economy from a potential default on its debt. The House passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling on Wednesday night local time, just days ahead of the June 5th deadline when the U.S. is poised to hit its borrowing limit. The final tally for the vote was 314 to 117. The bill now will be put for a vote at the Senate later this week, where it needs to be passed before President Biden can sign it into law. Biden praised the House for passing the bipartisan deal and urged the Senate to pass it as quickly as possible. Now, just a day after North Korea failed in its attempt to launch a spy satellite, the regime has made it clear they will pursue further attempts. Shin Se-byuk has the latest.
Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, says Pyongyang's reconnaissance satellite will soon be launched successfully into orbit to carry out missions, while reaffirming the North's resolute intention to develop reconnaissance means. This is according to a statement carried by Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency on Thursday. She also reiterated that Pyongyang is not interested in engaging in dialogue with the U.S., saying the regime has nothing to benefit from Washington's hostile policy. Kim Yo-jong's statement was released a day after the North's failed attempt to launch a military spy satellite. Early on Wednesday, Pyongyang fired off the space launch vehicle from Dongsanli in Pyeongan-buk-do province. It launched at around 6:29 a.m. and traveled in a southward direction before it fell into the West Sea due to engine failure. The attempt came only a day after Pyongyang spoke of its plan to launch a satellite into orbit sometime between May 31st and June 11th. Following the crash into the sea, Seoul's Joint Chief of Staff identified what they believed to be part of the projectile and retrieved it. They are now in the process of examining what was found. As for the reasons behind the failure, Seoul's intelligence agency points to the North's decision to suddenly shift the course of the vehicle towards the west, as well as a drastically shortened preparation process. Meanwhile, after the failure, the KCNA said that North Korea is currently analyzing what went wrong and will launch another rocket in the near future. To that, officials from Seoul's presidential office say the timing could come sometime before the 11th of this month, aligning with Pyongyang's previously shared timeline. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. indeed believe that North Korea will push ahead with launching additional spy satellites. The allies have sent out condemnation and strong warnings against such action. Lee Seung-jae has more.
According to South Korea's ambassador to the United States, Choi Han-dong, on Wednesday, the North's recent failed launch of a military reconnaissance satellite has violated UN Security Council resolutions, and the country will face consequences. He stressed that the North's provocative actions will only lead to further isolation. Cho also noted that the regime will eventually conduct a second launch, but there would also be a price to pay for such action. Meanwhile, the U.S. National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications, John Kirby, said Wednesday that North Korea must be held accountable despite the failed launch of its military spy satellite. According to Kirby, with each and every launch, whether a failure or success, the regime learns, adapts, and continues to develop military capabilities that are not only a threat to the Korean peninsula, but to the whole region. He added that the U.S. will continue to work with its allies and partners to hold Kim Jong-un and his regime accountable and to have the proper military capabilities in the region, including training and readiness to deal with those threats. In a resolution adopted by a majority of over 100 countries attending the International Maritime Organization's Security Committee meeting on Wednesday, condemned what they called a missile launch that seriously threatened the safety of seafarers and international shipping. Pyongyang rejected the resolution, saying that the missile test constitutes routine and planned self-defensive measures taken by a sovereign state to defend national security. It marks the first time that the IMO adopted a resolution condemning a North Korean missile launch. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Amid rising tensions on the Korean Peninsula, South Korea has successfully tested its long-range surface-to-air missile, or LSAM, in a major leap in counter-missile technology. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sung reports.
Over South Korea's western coast, a mock missile roars into the sky at supersonic speed. Moments later, some 200 kilometers away, another missile ignites and gives chase. The second missile rapidly closes the gap until... This is South Korea's long-range surface-to-air missile system, known as LSAM, a key component of the country's missile defense shield. It aims to shoot down North Korea's ballistic missiles in the case of an attack. The LSAM defense boasts a stunning accuracy, using homegrown cutting-edge precision tracker and kill vehicle. This enables it to track and destroy missiles, moving at supersonic speeds high up in the atmosphere. The South Korean Agency for Defense Development unveiled the LSAM to the press for the first time in trials this week. Onlookers, including journalists and Defense Minister Yo-jong held their breath as they watched. The test was a success.
As you just saw, the intercepting missile directly hit the target missile exactly on the spot that we had originally planned. Based on the success of this test, we are on track to complete the development phase in a timely manner.
Defense Minister Yo-jong hailed this technology as the core of the core in South Korea's stratified missile defense system. Development of the LSAM is scheduled for completion next year, followed by a production run in 2025. Full deployment within South Korea's military is expected before the close of the decade. But the Agency for Defense Development isn't resting on its laurels. Research and development is underway on the LSAM-2, an upgraded model with a capability to target supersonic missiles even higher in the sky. This comes as part of an ongoing commitment to innovate and evolve defense technologies to protect against potential threats from North Korea. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Intelligence Service says that a food shortage in North Korea is causing more starvation-related deaths. Crime and suicide are also on the up. Lee Jae-yeon has the details.
North Korea is fighting a severe food crisis. South Korea's National Intelligence Service on Wednesday said in a press briefing that deaths due to starvation have increased significantly.
Compared to the same period a year earlier, corn prices have soared 60%, while rice increased 30% in the first quarter in Pyongyang. It's the highest level since Kim Jong-un became the leader.
Deaths due to starvation, according to the agency, are estimated to triple the amount from the previous year. And because of this, other social issues are arising, such as violent crimes and robberies. The NIS said the number of violent crimes tripled to 300 compared to a year earlier, while homemade bomb attacks to rob personal properties have increased as well. The number of suicides has gone up to 40% compared to last year. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un said he will consider this as treason against their ideology and urged for prompt measures to prevent further suicides. Meanwhile, North Korea's COVID-19 related situation was also disclosed during Wednesday's briefing. The agency said Pyongyang had increased its cross-border train operation to China from once a day to twice. The North had originally planned to additionally open roads between China's coastal city of Tandong and the city of Sinuiju just across the border into North Korea, but has not seen any progress. This is because there are lockdowns in some parts of Pyongyang following mass infections of COVID-19. Lee Jae-yeon, Arirang News.
The International Atomic Energy Agency released another report on the safety of Japan's Fukushima wastewater, seemingly backing Tokyo's planned release. In a sixth interim report following their on-site inspection, the IAEA said Japan's method of analyzing contaminated Fukushima wastewater was appropriate and that no significant radionuclides were found in the samples. It stated that no additional radionuclides other than tritium were detected significant levels, but it added that any tritium left over after passing through the filtering system will be diluted before below the standard and discharged. The latest report was focused on examining Japan's analysis of samples taken from contaminated water storage tanks. Meanwhile, a South Korean delegation of experts was also in Fukushima for their own inspection last week. They say there has been meaningful progress in terms of a scientific review of the treatment facilities, but more analysis needed to verify safety. Our political correspondent Han Sung-woo has more.
After returning from their on-site inspections of the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant last week, South Korea's delegation of 21 experts has concluded they will need more time to comprehensively assess whether it's truly safe enough for Japan to release the plant's wastewater into the Pacific Ocean beginning this summer.
Through the on-site inspections and the detailed data that's been collected, meaningful progress was made in terms of a scientific and technological review of the plant's facilities. But further analysis will be needed to reach a more accurate, thorough conclusion on the facility's performance adequacy and potential for long-term operation.
The head of the inspection team, Yuguki, said during a briefing on Wednesday, however, that the delegation managed to obtain various relevant data from Japan, including raw data on the radioactive water's concentration levels at the Advanced Liquid Processing System's entrance and exit, allowing them to determine how contaminated the water is before and after multinuclide removal treatment. He added that the team was able to examine the emergency isolation valves designed to immediately halt the discharge of ALPS-treated wastewater into the sea should an abnormality arise.
We confirmed on-site that extra, manually maneuverable valves were installed in case of the emergency valves don't work. The emergency valves were also designed to close automatically in the event of a power failure.
Yu cautioned, though, that the fact the power plant's facilities were installed according to design does not guarantee their performance. Moving forward, he said the delegation will examine more data coming from Japan and keep in touch with Japanese authorities for further inquiries. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The United States Pentagon has claimed that a Chinese military jet engaged in a, quote, unnecessarily aggressive maneuver near a U.S. military plane. It said the incident occurred in international airspace last week over the South China Sea while the U.S. plane was conducting what it called safe and routine operations. Footage from the event shows the Chinese J-16 aircraft cross in front of the U.S. RC-135 plane, leaving turbulence in its wake. A spokesperson for China's embassy in Washington responded that the U.S. needs to stop deflecting blame on China. And according to the Chinese military, the U.S. aircraft deliberately intruded into its training area. Relations between Washington and Beijing have been increasingly strained since former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the self-governing island of Taiwan last August, and the U.S. shot down a Chinese spy balloon off the U.S. coast in February. A group of experts appointed by NASA to study unidentified flying objects has collected over 800 reports of mysterious events. The 16-member panel is tasked with finding ways that NASA can help understand unidentified aerial phenomena. It held a public meeting for the first time on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. The panel said that only a few of the reported incidents cannot be truly explained from a scientific perspective. It also shed light on factors that hamper work in the field, including NASA privacy limitations, stigma of reporting events, harassment of scientists, and data skewed by microwaves and optical illusions. Turning over to Hollywood, Godfather star Al Pacino is expecting his fourth child at the age of 83. He is reportedly having the child with his 29-year-old girlfriend, Noor Al-Fala. The actor is well known for his iconic roles in Scarface and The Godfather, and also won the Oscar for Best Actor for 1992's Scent of a Woman. He has 3 other children from 2 previous partners, and his youngest child is 22 years old. The news comes just a few weeks after it was revealed that actor Robert De Niro welcomed his 7th child at the age of 79. And finally, 7 ducklings born on the roof of an apartment block in the English city of Manchester were saved by a local duck rescuer. Avid bird lover and retired Royal Navy survival specialist Steve Stuttard carried out the rescue on Monday, releasing the ducklings near a quayside where they were joined by their mother. This is not the first such rescue for Stuttard, as the mother duck has reportedly nested on the roof for 4 years. Stuttard normally uses a bucket to slowly lower the ducklings to the ground. He avoids using the elevator, as he says it's important not to disrupt the bond between the ducklings and their mother. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The first day of June kicked off on a cloudy note. In fact, those in the southern parts of the country are having another rainy day. Rain that started from Jeju and the south coast is gradually spreading to the rest of the south. And the further south you are, the heavier the rain you're going to see, with Gyeongsang, Namdo, and Jeju to receive 10 to 40 millimeters of rainfall, along with thunder and lightning at times. Meanwhile, it's going to stay partly sunny in the central areas, and it will be as warm as yesterday, but temperatures to drop a few notches along with rain in the southern parts of the country. But Daegu is as bearable as yesterday. Busan noticing a slight drop in highs this afternoon. Poor air quality in Incheon should improve as the day goes on, and the rest of the country should have air quality remaining normal to good all day today. Now, rain in the south should let up tomorrow dawn with a rise in afternoon temperatures in the south, while the warming trend continues through the weekend. Now, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of the day.